3.8 seconds. That's how long it took for a toxic cloud to travel from a chemical factory into the lungs of sleeping children. By sunrise, 16,000 people were dead, their crime, living too close to a corporation that valued profit over human life. Right now, as you watch this video, there are 54 chemical plants around the world sitting on the same powder keg. One valve failure, one ignored warning, one cost-cutting decision. That's all it takes to turn your city into a graveyard. What you're about to discover will change how you see the factories in your neighborhood forever. Because the disaster I'm going to reveal wasn't just the deadliest industrial catastrophe in human history. It was completely preventable, and the company responsible. They paid less in compensation than the cost of a single fighter jet. But before I show you how 16,000 people died in their sleep, you need to understand something crucial. This wasn't the first time humans created hell on Earth, and it won't be the last. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll know the 5 red disasters that governments tried to erase from history. And I promise you, the truth is far more terrifying than anything Hollywood has ever created. April 25, 1986, Pripyat, Soviet Union. A city so advanced, so futuristic that families from across the USSR competed for the privilege to live there. The average age, 26. These weren't just workers. They were the Soviet Union's brightest minds, building the future one nuclear reactor at a time. Alexei Volkov kissed his wife goodbye at 7 a.m. His shift at reactor number 4 would be routine, he promised. Just another safety test. He'd be home for dinner. He had 8 hours to live. By 1:23 a.m. on April 26, the control room of Chernobyl Reactor 4 looked like a vision of hell. Warning lights screamed across every panel. The reactor core temperature had reached 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt steel like butter, hot enough to turn water into explosive hydrogen gas in milliseconds. Engineer Leonid Toptunov stared at his console in disbelief. The reactor power was spiking uncontrollably. He pressed the emergency shutdown button, AZ5, the button that was supposed to save them. Instead, it killed them. You see, Soviet engineers had designed the control rods with a fatal flaw. When inserted into an already critical reactor, they actually increased the reaction for 5 seconds before suppressing it. 5 seconds. That's all it took for Reactor 4 to explode with the force of 500 atomic bombs. The 2,000-ton reactor lid, a cap of steel and concrete, was launched into the air like a bottle cap. It landed vertically, embedded in the reactor hull, creating a direct channel for radioactive material to pour into the atmosphere. Firefighter Vasily Ignatyenko arrived 6 minutes after the explosion. He had no idea he was staring into the exposed core of a nuclear reactor. The radiation level at that moment: 30,000 Roentgens per hour. A lethal dose is 400 Roentgens total. He absorbed a fatal dose in less than 1 minute, but Vasily kept fighting the fire for 5 hours. His skin began to change color that night. By morning, it had turned black. Within 14 days, his internal organs liquefied. His wife held his hand as he died, not knowing she was pregnant with their child. Their baby girl was born 6 months later and died 4 hours after birth, her tiny body absorbing the radiation her mother had carried from her father's dying flesh. 31 people died in the immediate aftermath. But that's where the official story ends and the cover-up begins. The Soviet government evacuated Pripyat 36 hours after the explosion. 36 hours. Families ate contaminated food. Children played in radioactive dust. The official announcement told them they'd return in 3 days. They never did. Today, the Chernobyl exclusion zone spans 1,000 square miles. Trees don't decompose there. The radiation has killed the bacteria and fungi that break down organic matter. Dead trees from 1986 still stand, perfectly preserved in a forest of death. The total death toll. The Soviet Union claimed 31. Independent scientists estimate 16,000 cancer deaths directly attributable to Chernobyl radiation. The same number that died in one night in the disaster I'm about to reveal. But here's What keeps me awake at night? Chernobyl wasn't even the worst nuclear disaster in Soviet history. In 1957, a nuclear waste tank exploded in the Ural Mountains, contaminating an area larger than Chernobyl. The Soviets hit it so effectively that the West didn't discover it until 1976. If they could hide something that massive for 19 years, what else don't we know? Remember that question, because the next disaster I'm about to show you proves that explosions don't need nuclear reactors to kill thousands. August 4th, 2020. 6 minutes past 6 in the evening. Beirut, Lebanon. A city already on its knees from economic collapse was about to experience the equivalent of a small nuclear weapon detonating in its port. For 6 years, 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate sat in Warehouse 12. That's the same explosive compound Timothy McVeigh used to destroy the Oklahoma City Federal Building, except Beirut had 140 times more of it. Port workers had sent 6 official warnings to the Lebanese government. 6 written documents stamped and filed explaining that the warehouse was a ticking bomb. The response? Bureaucratic silence. At 6:07 p.m., a small fire started in Warehouse 12. Security cameras captured workers attempting to extinguish it with handheld fire extinguishers. 18 seconds later, a small explosion sent up a plume of reddish-brown smoke. Then, at 6:08 p.m., the ammonium nitrate detonated. The explosion released energy equivalent to 1.1 kilotons of TNT. For context, that's approximately 1/15 the power of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. The shockwave traveled faster than sound itself. At ground zero, everything within a radius of 460 feet simply ceased to exist, vaporized. The blast crater was 43 feet deep and 410 feet wide. Steel-reinforced concrete buildings within this zone were reduced to molecular dust. At half a mile away, the shockwave hit with an overpressure of 15 pounds per square inch. That's enough force to collapse lungs, rupture eardrums, and turn human bodies into projectiles. Survivors described feeling their internal organs compress and then expand violently as the pressure wave passed through them. At 1.5 miles away, windows exploded inward with the force of shotgun blasts. Glass shards traveling at 200 miles per hour turned living rooms into killing zones. More people died from glass injuries than from the initial blast. At 6 miles away, the explosion registered as a magnitude 3.3 earthquake. Apartment buildings swayed. Ceiling panels fell. The sonic boom was heard 150 miles away in Cyprus. The mushroom cloud rose over 2 miles into the atmosphere. Satellites tracked the dust plume as it spread across the Mediterranean Sea. Ships 100 miles offshore reported their windows cracking. In the first 3 seconds, 218 people died. In the first hour, that number reached 137. More were never found. The official count stopped at 218, but search teams were still pulling bodies from rubble 6 months later. 300,000 people were instantly made homeless. Half the city's buildings sustained structural damage. The economic loss exceeded $15 billion in a country whose entire GDP was only $52 billion. But here's the part that should terrify you. This wasn't a sophisticated terrorist attack. This wasn't a military operation. This was pure negligence. Government officials literally received written warnings that this would happen and did nothing. An investigation revealed that at least 8 officials knew the danger. Emails were uncovered showing explicit warnings like, "This cargo is extremely dangerous and could destroy the port entirely." The response from one official: "Noted." As of today, not a single person has been convicted. The investigation has been blocked 7 times by political interference. The ammonium nitrate that wasn't destroyed in the explosion. Nobody knows where it went. Somewhere in Beirut there are still tons of explosive material unaccounted for, and this brings us to a disturbing pattern. Notice something. Chernobyl ignored safety tests. Beirut ignored written warnings. The disasters that kill the most people aren't accidents. They're the predictable result of knowing something is dangerous and choosing profit or convenience over human life. Which brings me to the disaster that defines this pattern, the one that killed more people in a single night than any industrial catastrophe in human history. The one where the company responsible is still operating today, still making billions, and has never apologized. Pause for a second. I want you to do something. Open Google Maps. Type in chemical plant near me. Go ahead, I'll wait. Look at how close some of these facilities are to residential areas. Quarter of a mile. Half a mile. Some are literally across the street from elementary schools. Now here's the disturbing truth. Every single facility you just found stores chemicals that, if released, could replicate what I'm about to describe. And just like Chernobyl, just like Beirut, there are warnings being ignored right now. Cost-cutting measures being approved right now. Safety inspections being postponed right now. The disaster I'm about to reveal happened because a corporation built a pesticide factory in the middle of a densely populated city. They chose that location deliberately. Labor was cheaper, land was cheaper, and when things went wrong, the victims were too poor to sue. December 2nd, 1984, Bhopal, India. The night poison fell from the sky like rain. And 16,000 people discovered that when corporations play with death, the poor always pay the price. Imagine falling asleep next to your children, confident that tomorrow will be just another day. You don't know that 300 yards away, inside a Union Carbide pesticide plant, 42 tons of methyl isocyanate gas are heating up inside a storage tank. You don't know that cost-cutting measures have disabled 6 separate safety systems. You don't know that the refrigeration unit meant to keep the gas cool has been shut off to save electricity. You don't know that the flare tower designed to burn off leaked gas has been disconnected for maintenance and never repaired. You don't know that in 90 minutes, you'll wake up drowning in your own bodily fluids as your lungs dissolve from the inside. This is what happened to 500,000 people on December 3rd, 1984. At 11 p.m. on December 2nd, water entered storage tank 610. This shouldn't have been possible, but maintenance workers, undertrained and underpaid, were flushing pipes without properly sealing connections. Water mixed with methyl isocyanate creates an exothermic reaction. Translation: it generates heat, intense heat. By 11:30 p.m., the temperature inside the tank reached 400 degrees Fahrenheit. The pressure gauge was climbing past its maximum reading. Normally, 6 safety systems would have prevented catastrophe. Let me tell you what happened to each one. Safety System 1, the refrigeration unit, shut down 3 months earlier to cut costs, never restarted. Safety System 2, the vent gas scrubber, designed to neutralize leaked gas with caustic soda. It was in standby mode, turned off because Union Carbide deemed it unnecessary during routine operations. Safety System 3, the flare tower, meant to burn off gas before it escaped. It had been disassembled for maintenance 4 months earlier. Replacement parts were never ordered because they were expensive. Safety System 4, water curtains to spray down leaking gas. They were designed for a maximum height of 40 feet. The gas leak occurred at 120 feet. Even if activated, they would have been useless. Safety System 5, emergency siren to warn the surrounding population. Company policy required manager approval before sounding it. The manager on duty was in the bathroom. Safety System 6, trained emergency response team. Union Carbide had reduced the crew from 12 to 6, and only 2 were on duty that night. At 12:10 a.m. on December 3rd, the tank ruptured. 42 tons of methyl isocyanate erupted into the Bhopal night. The gas was 2.1 times heavier than air. It didn't rise and disperse. It rolled across the ground like a deadly fog, pouring into homes, filling bedrooms, suffocating sleeping families. The emergency siren finally sounded at 12:50 a.m. 40 minutes after the leak began. By then, the toxic cloud covered 15 square miles. Survivors described waking up to a burning sensation in their eyes and throat. Within seconds, they were coughing uncontrollably. Within minutes, they were vomiting and unable to breathe. The gas attacked mucous membranes first, then lung tissue, causing pulmonary edema. Victims literally drowned in the fluid that filled their lungs. Families ran into the streets, blinded and choking. Parents carried children who had stopped breathing. The local hospitals had no idea what chemical they were treating. Union Carbide refused to disclose the toxicity information, claiming it was proprietary trade secret information. By sunrise, the Bhopal morgues had run out of space. Bodies were lined up on sidewalks. Mass cremations began immediately because there was no infrastructure to handle thousands of corpses in tropical heat. Many victims were burned without being identified. Families never knew what happened to their loved ones. The official death toll in the first 72 hours was 3,787, but this is where the numbers become lies. In the weeks following, people continued to die. Damaged lungs gave out. Chemical burns became infected. The poison had compromised immune systems so severely that minor infections became fatal. By the end of the first month, the real death toll exceeded 8,000, but the dying didn't stop. Over the next 20 years, medical studies tracked the survivors: chronic respiratory diseases, neurological damage, genetic mutations, birth defects in children born to survivors, cancer clusters. The long-term death toll attributed directly to chemical exposure: 16,000 confirmed deaths. Some estimates go as high as 25,000. And here's the part that should make your blood boil: Union Carbide's response. The company initially claimed the disaster was caused by sabotage. They said a disgruntled employee deliberately added water to the tank. No evidence was ever provided. Independent investigations conclusively proved it was systematic negligence and cost-cutting. The compensation battle took 7 years. Union Carbide finally agreed to pay $470 million. That sounds like a lot until you divide it among the victims. Each family received an average of $500 per death, $500 for a human life. The CEO, Warren Anderson, was charged with manslaughter. An arrest warrant was issued. He flew to India, was arrested, posted bail, and immediately left the country. The U.S. government refused to extradite him. He lived comfortably in New York until his death in 2014. He never faced trial. He never apologized. Union Carbide was later bought by Dow Chemical in 2001. Dow has refused to clean up the contaminated site in Bhopal. To this day, the abandoned factory leaks toxic chemicals into groundwater. Birth defects in Bhopal are 10 times the national average. The poison is still killing people. And the company? It's still operating, still profitable, still fighting lawsuits from Bhopal survivors who want the site cleaned up. This is what happens when corporations know disaster is possible and choose profit anyway. But at least Bhopal was an accident, right? At least nobody deliberately created catastrophe. Or did they? Because the next disaster I'm going to show you was intentional. A military test where scientists knew exactly how dangerous it was and they did it anyway. And when it went wrong, they didn't just ignore the victims. They erased them from history. March 1, 1954. Bikini Atoll, Marshall Islands. The United States military was about to detonate the most powerful nuclear weapon ever tested by America. Code name: Castle Bravo. The bomb was designed to yield 6 megatons. That's 6 million tons of TNT equivalent, 400 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Scientists calculated the fallout zone, established a safety perimeter, and evacuated personnel to what they considered a safe distance. At 6:45 a.m., Castle Bravo detonated. The fireball measured 2.8 miles in diameter. The flash of light was visible from 250 miles away. The mushroom cloud rose 25 miles into the stratosphere, and then the scientists realized something was very wrong. The bomb hadn't yielded 6 megatons. It yielded 15 megatons, 2.5 times more powerful than designed. The fireball was twice as large as predicted, and the wind was blowing in the wrong direction. The fallout cloud, loaded with radioactive isotopes, was drifting directly toward inhabited islands that were supposed to be outside the danger zone. On Rongelap Atoll, 82 miles downwind, 347 people were living their normal lives. They had not been evacuated because military planners assumed they were safely outside the fallout zone. They weren't. 4 hours after the detonation, white powder began falling from the sky. The islanders had never seen snow. Some children played in it, laughing as they caught the flakes on their tongues. Parents collected it, fascinated by the strange substance. It was radioactive fallout. Every flake contained cesium-137, strontium-90, and iodine-131. They were playing in atomized death. Within hours, people began experiencing symptoms: nausea, vomiting, burns appearing on skin, hair falling out. The U.S. military didn't evacuate them for 48 hours. 2 full days breathing radioactive air, drinking contaminated water, eating contaminated food. When they were finally evacuated, military doctors documented their symptoms extensively. Blood tests, tissue samples, photographs of radiation burns. This medical data was classified top secret for decades because the people of Rongelap weren't victims of an accident. They were subjects of a research study. Declassified documents from 1994 revealed that U.S. military scientists explicitly wanted to study the effects of nuclear fallout on human populations. The people of Rongelap provided a perfect, controlled experiment, the official term used in internal memos: unexposed population suitable for medical follow-up. Translation: human guinea pigs. Over the following decades, the health impacts manifested. Thyroid cancer rates on Rongelap were 33 times higher than normal. Birth defects became common. Children born without bones, without brains. Miscarriage rates soared. One woman reported 12 consecutive miscarriages, but it wasn't just the Marshall Islanders. The fishing vessel Lucky Dragon 5 was 80 miles from the blast. The Japanese crew saw the flash on the horizon but thought nothing of it. Hours later, white ash began falling on the deck. The crew collected samples, not understanding what they were holding. Within days, all 23 crew members were violently ill. Their skin developed severe burns. Their hair fell out. One crew member, Eikichi Kubiyama, died 7 months later from acute radiation syndrome. His last words were, "I pray that I am the last victim of an atomic or hydrogen bomb." He was. The radioactive contamination spread far beyond the Marshall Islands. Tuna caught in the Pacific tested positive for radiation. Milk in the United States showed elevated radioactivity levels from cows eating contaminated grass. The fallout had circled the globe. And here's the truly chilling part. Castle Bravo wasn't an accident. The bomb designers knew the reaction might run away. They knew the yield could be higher than predicted. They proceeded anyway because Cold War politics demanded bigger bombs, faster development, and any cost was acceptable as long as it wasn't being paid by American citizens. Except it was. Downwinders in Nevada and Utah were exposed to radiation from hundreds of U.S. nuclear tests. Cancer clusters appeared in small towns that the government dismissed as coincidence for 40 years. Compensation programs weren't established until 1990, 36 years after Castle Bravo. The Marshall Islands were finally awarded $150 million in compensation in 1986. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $380 million today. Sounds reasonable until you realize the U.S. has conducted 67 nuclear tests in the Marshall Islands. That's less than $6 million per nuclear detonation to compensate for permanent contamination of ancestral homelands. Parts of the Marshall Islands remain uninhabitable today. Radiation levels on some islands are still higher than Chernobyl exclusion zone readings. The people displaced by U.S. nuclear testing have never been allowed to return home, and the scientists who knowingly exposed them, none were prosecuted. Many received promotions for advancing nuclear weapons development. This is what happens when military objectives override human rights, when test subjects are chosen because they lack political power to demand accountability. But at least these were extraordinary circumstances, right? Nuclear weapons, Cold War desperation. Surely in peacetime and civilian projects we wouldn't accept such reckless disregard for safety, except we do, every single day. And the final disaster I'm about to reveal proves that sometimes the most catastrophic failures come from the structures we trust most, the buildings we work in, the infrastructure we depend on, and the engineers who tried to warn us before it was too late. August 8, 1975. Henan Province, China. The Banqiao Dam was an engineering marvel designed to control the Ru River and provide hydroelectric power to millions. Chinese engineers called it the Iron Dam, claiming it could survive a 1 in 1,000-year flood. They were wrong. Typhoon Nina had been downgraded to a tropical storm by the time it reached Henan. Nobody was particularly worried. The region experienced storms regularly, but this storm was different. In 24 hours, it would drop over 3 feet of rain. That's an entire year's worth of rainfall in one day. By August 7th, the Banqiao Dam reservoir was reaching maximum capacity. Floodgates were open to release water, but the downstream dams were also full. There was nowhere for the water to go. By midnight, the Banqiao Dam was holding back more water than it was ever designed to contain. At 1:30 a.m. on August 8th, the dam's structure began to fail. Cracks appeared in the concrete face. Water started seeping through, widening the fissures. Engineers on site frantically tried to open more floodgates, but it was too late. At 1:33 a.m., the Banqiao Dam collapsed. 700 million cubic meters of water, roughly equal to the volume of 300,000 Olympic swimming pools, exploded through the breach. The wall of water was 20 feet high, traveling at 30 miles per hour. It swept away everything in its path. Entire villages vanished in seconds. Homes built from brick and concrete were pulverized into debris. People sleeping in their beds were torn apart by the force of the water before they could wake. But the Banqiao wasn't alone. The massive surge of water overwhelmed the Shimantan Dam downstream. It collapsed 12 minutes later. Then another dam failed. And another. In a domino effect of catastrophic failures, 62 dams collapsed in 6 hours. The destruction zone covered 5,000 square miles. Imagine an area larger than the state of Connecticut underwater in minutes. Villages, towns, farmland, factories, all buried beneath a moving lake of debris-filled water. The official death toll released by the Chinese government years later: 26,000 people killed directly by the flood. But here's where the numbers become a crime scene. International disaster researchers who analyze the collapse estimate the real death toll at between 85,000 and 240,000 people. Why such a massive discrepancy? Because most people didn't die from the flood. They died from what came after. The flood destroyed 11 million homes. 6 million people were instantly made homeless in a rural region with no disaster infrastructure. Refugee camps were established, but with roads destroyed and railroads washed away, supplies couldn't reach them. Starvation began within days. Then disease, cholera, typhoid, dysentery. The contaminated water became a biological weapon, killing tens of thousands over the following months. The Chinese government classified all information about the disaster. International aid organizations were denied access. The disaster was erased from public discussion. For 17 years, the Banqiao Dam collapse didn't officially exist. The government didn't acknowledge it until 1992, when it finally declassified documents related to the event. Even then, the full scope of the disaster was minimized. Why the cover-up? Because the dam failure exposed systematic flaws in Chinese engineering and planning. It revealed that political pressure had overridden safety concerns during construction. Engineers had warned that the dam design couldn't handle extreme flood conditions. Their reports were dismissed as bourgeois pessimism, and some engineers were punished for lack of revolutionary optimism. Sound familiar? Engineers warned about Chernobyl's reactor design. Ignored. Officials warned about Beirut's explosive stockpile. Ignored. Union Carbide knew Bhopal's safety systems were failing, ignored. Scientists knew Castle Bravo could exceed yield projections. They proceeded anyway. And at Banqiao, the pattern repeated. Political objectives and economic pressures silenced the experts who understood the risks. Today, China has built hundreds more dams. The Three Gorges Dam, completed in 2006, is the world's largest hydroelectric project. It displaces 660 times more water than Banqiao did. If it failed, the death toll could reach millions. Chinese engineers insist it's safe. They said the same thing about Banqiao. 5 disasters, 5 different technologies, 5 different countries, but notice the pattern that connects them all. In every single case, someone knew. Engineers submitted reports. Officials received warnings. Scientists predicted the outcomes. And every single time, the people in power made the same calculation. They weighed human lives against cost, against political pressure, against corporate profit. And every single time, they chose wrong. Chernobyl happened because Soviet authorities prioritized reactor production over safety redesigns. Beirut happened because Lebanese officials couldn't be bothered to remove a known explosive threat. Bhopal happened because Union Carbide cut costs by disabling safety systems. Castle Bravo happened because military scientists valued weapons data over human subjects. Banqiao happened because political ideology overruled engineering expertise. And here's the terrifying truth. This is still happening right now. There are chemical plants operating today with disabled safety systems because repairs are expensive. There are aging dams holding back catastrophic floods because dam maintenance doesn't win elections. There are nuclear facilities running reactors past their design lifespans because building new ones is politically difficult. Right now, in your country, there are infrastructure systems one failure away from disaster. And the people responsible for maintaining them are making the same cost-benefit calculations that killed 16,000 people in Bhopal. That killed 230,000 people at Banqiao. That poisoned entire Pacific Islands with radiation. The International Chemical Safety Board tracks high-risk industrial facilities. Their latest report identified 54 sites worldwide that, if they experienced a catastrophic failure similar to Bhopal, could kill more than 10,000 people each. 54 ticking time bombs surrounded by densely populated areas, many with inadequate safety systems. You can't see the danger. It's hidden behind corporate assurances and government safety ratings. But the engineers see it, the inspectors see it, the workers see it. And they're trying to warn us, just like the engineers before Chernobyl, the officials before Beirut, the scientists before Castle Bravo. The question is, are we listening? Or will your city be the next name on this list? You've now seen the truth behind 5 disasters that killed hundreds of thousands of people. Disasters that were completely preventable. Disasters that happened because warnings were ignored, because corporations valued profit over human life, because governments prioritize secrecy over accountability. But this isn't just history. This is a warning. The same patterns that caused these catastrophes are repeating right now. The same calculations are being made. The same warnings are being dismissed. And unless we demand accountability, unless we force transparency, unless we make it politically and economically impossible to ignore safety concerns, the next disaster is inevitable. So here's what I want you to do. Check the industrial facilities near your home. Research their safety records. Find out if they're storing hazardous materials. Contact your local representatives and demand transparency. Because the people of Bhopal didn't know they were living next to a chemical bomb. The people of Rongelap didn't know they were downwind from a nuclear test. And by the time they found out, it was too late. Which disaster shocked you the most? Drop a comment below. And if you think this information needs to be shared, hit that subscribe button, because I'm investigating more covered-up catastrophes that governments don't want you to know about. 96% of you watching aren't subscribed. If this video taught you something you didn't learn in school, something the media doesn't talk about, that's exactly why this channel exists. Next video, I'm exposing the biological disasters that are even more terrifying than what you just watched, because at least chemical leaks and nuclear radiation eventually decay. But what happens when we create diseases that never stop spreading? Stay tuned. These disasters weren't accidents. They were choices. Remember that, and make sure your voice is heard before the next choice is made.